Chapter 4. Menesi heard an astonished murmuring from the director boxes on his right, and felt himself that the fellow's impudent last remark might well have been answered by a pulse of nerve stimulation. Spokesman Dawn, however, replied calmly that the machine happened to be indispensable to Earth, a planetary economy, and one on the verge of becoming an interplanetary and even interstellar economy, was simply too intricate and precariously balanced to structure to maintain without the assistance of a very tightly organised governing class. If the machine were to vanish today, he explained, Earth would approach a state of complete chaos before the month was out. In a year, 1 billion human beings would be starving to death. There would be fighting, wars. He shrugged. You name it. No, my friend, the machine is here to stay, and the Mars convicts may as well resign themselves to the fact. Rainbolt replied earnestly that he was not too well informed in economics, that not being his field. However, he had been told and believed that while the situation described by the spokesman would be true today, it would not take many years to train the populations of Earth to run their affairs quite as efficiently as the machine had done, and without loss of personal and political liberties. At any rate, the Mars convicts and their descendants did not intend to give up the independence they had acquired. On the other hand, they had two vital reasons for wanting to come to an agreement with Earth. One was that they might waste centuries in attempting to accomplish by themselves what they could now do immediately if Earth's vast resources were made available to them. And the other, of course, was the obvious fact that Earth would not remain indefinitely without a star drive of its own. If an unfriendly government was in control when it obtained one, the Mars convicts would be forced either to abandon their newly settled planets and retreat farther into the galaxy, or submit to Earth's superior strengths. Meanwhile, however, they had developed the principles of oneness. Oneness was in essence a philosophy, but it had many practical applications, and it was in such practical applications that he, Rainbolt, was a trained specialist. He had, therefore, been dispatched to Earth to introduce the principles which would in time bring about the orderly disintegration to the system of the machine, to be followed by the establishment of an Earth government with which the Mars convicts could deal without detriment to themselves. Menesi had listened with a sense of growing angry incredulity. The fellow couldn't be as much of a fool as he seemed. Therefore, he had devised this hoax after he realized he would be captured, to cover up his real purpose, which could only be that of a spy. Menesi saw that Administrator Bradshaw was saying something in a low voice to the spokesman, his face stony. Dawn glanced over at him and looked back at the prisoner and said impassively, So the goal of your missionary work here is the disintegration of the machine? Rainbolt nodded, with an air almost of eagerness. Yes, sir, it is, and if I will now be permitted to explain. I am afraid you will be permitted to do nothing, Spokesman Dawn said dryly, except, of course, to answer the number of questions we intend to ask you. Rainbolt checked himself, looking startled. The spokesman's hand had moved very slightly on the desk before him, and Rainbolt had just had his first experience with direct nerve stimulation. He stood kneading his right hand with his left, staring up at the spokesman, mouth half open. It would have been a low-level pulse, of course, but even a low-level pulse arriving unexpectedly was a very unpleasant surprise. He had foreseen the spokesman's action, had, in fact, felt a sympathetic imaginary twinge in his own right hand as the pulse reached the prisoner. Rainbolt swallowed, said in a charged voice, Sir, we heard from the two captured men that the machine has retained its practice of torture during interrogations. It isn't necessary to convince me that you were serious about this. Do the questions you refer to have to do with the star drive? The spokesman nodded. Of course. Rainbolt said stubbornly, Then, sir, it can do you no good at all to torture me. I simply don't have such information. We do plan to make the star drive freely available to Earth, but not while Earth is ruled by the organization of the machine. This time, Menesi did not observe the motion of the spokesman's hand. Instead, he saw Rainbolt jerk violently to the right. At the same moment, a blast of intense, fiery, almost unbearable pain shot up his own arm. As he grasped his arm, sweat pouring out on his face, he heard screams from the box to his left and realized it was Director Cornelius who screamed. There was answering screams from around the hall. Then the pain suddenly subsided.